Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Emergence Show. I'm your host, Nico Farah. Today, we're exploring a fascinating intersection, the bridge between physical craftsmanship and digital world building. My guest today has been blending art and programming since the early 1980s, long before creative tech was a buzzword. She has gone from fabricating practical effects for movies like Star Wars and Avatar to architecting the future of ethical AI and open metaverse. She is the CEO of Realitycraft, the VP of the XR Guild, and she is here to tell us about a new library for ethical design. Please welcome Evo Heyning. Evo, welcome to the show. Everyone in the chat, tag a friend who needs to stop prompting and start prototyping. Let us know where you are tuning in from, and please share your comments and questions throughout the conversation. We will definitely get to them. Evo, you are amazing. Thank you for taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much, Nico. It's great to see you both here and in the world doing this work. It's great to
Thank
be
you.
a part of it.
I appreciate it. And, it's not a group or organization that I have been part of and your name hasn't come. So I'm really excited that we finally got the chance to go through your journey and discussion. So I want to hear from you. Tell us kind of like a little bit about your background and, how you just stepped into this space and now paving the way for everyone else.
Sure, Nico. I began as a creative technologist as a kid. I was coding at the age of 6. I was also painting and working in oil pastels and doing pretty large works. So I did my first exhibition of art when I was 5 and my first code demo for the Virginia State Legislature when I was 6. And I just kept going, making theater and little computer games and all sorts of experiments. And I like to experiment. So some days I would be out in the woods making a book. And then the next day I would be teaching my friends in second grade how to code. So I've always enjoyed that dance between creativity and technology and figuring out what it can do for delight and for joy, for helping us plan more interesting futures. And so I ended up pursuing some degrees in that. My master's degree was at Singularity. They had a graduate program specifically for integration between AI and social impact. And so while working in the XR field, I've been in what's now considered AR, VR, XR virtual spaces for 20 years. I decided to add on my work, sort of working on the full stack from an ethical and an appropriate technology point of view. So I ran nonprofit organizations. I've been a monk. I've been a teacher. I've been an exhibiting artist and a producer, as well as someone who sits with world leaders and advises them on how to approach these technologies in an appropriate way.
Wow, mic drop. Very fascinating background. I had no idea that you've done all of this, but yeah, it's very exciting. So yeah, I would love to dig in a little bit more. Maybe you can tell us, how was your experience in virtual effects and kind of like what was one fundamental principle that remained the same, whether you were, working on the movie set or, working on AI models or XR space?
So I started out as sort of an indie guerrilla filmmaker in the 90s where we would just pick up a digital video camera from anywhere and go shoot with our friends. And so my first movie making, I had to figure out all the effects because that was my job. I was art director and second camera and writing. So I had to just figure it out. And at the time I was teaching art. So I worked with my students and said, okay, how can we make a castle that crushes? Or how can we make a very simple digital effect? right? And so I started from that experimental point of view. And then I moved to LA, where people obviously have been doing this professionally for decades, centuries, really, more than over a century. So I jumped in as different roles on set. I was a body painter, I was a writer, I worked in technical workflows. So I have a live streaming background going back about 25 years. And so figuring out how to connect social media, virtual worlds, and live streaming was something I was working on back in 2006, 7, 8, 9. What was early mixed reality? And so I started teaching these approaches to interactive design and interactive production. And then we started to get glasses. We started to get VR. We started to see sort of the early stages of smart glasses as well. And so I dove into the experimentation there too, which was really interesting from a problem solving point of view. I can always see the best possible application. So for example, smart glasses after a disaster can help you recover people and hopefully save lives, whether it's on first responders like firemen or being able to work together and coordinate your emergency teams. There's some really fantastic use cases for the AR, VR, XR integrations that many of you are working on today. At the same time, I love art and creativity. I love connecting us to nature. And so some of the things I've worked on, like 10 years ago, we were prototyping a thing called Seeds the Game, which was an early AR game for getting people out in nature, growing food together and trying things. And the folks at Seeds the Game down in SoCal have picked that project up again, now with vibe coding with students. So they're working on it with students, making apps and games like Touch Grass to be able to go out and play.
Love that. So we both were at an event yesterday, and someone on the panel mentioned the Touch the Grass app. So really cool. Thank you for sharing all of this. Really cool stuff, really great work. I want to take a moment and say hi to our amazing live engaged audience. Hi, everyone. Felipe, Carlos, Chris, Christina, Similo, I hope I'm not pronouncing your name wrong. And Ole, we appreciate you all for being here from different parts of the world, Lagos, Ukraine, Texas, LA. We're so grateful for you all to be here. Please share your comments and ask questions. We'll be delighted to answer them. Awesome. So let's talk about this concept of Realitycraft. You have worked on so many different things. You have written about prompt craft, but you also argue that we need to go deeper into Realitycraft. I would love for you to explain to us what that means to you and why is that so important?
So I believe that as world creators, as world builders, as designers, our job is to stay in inquiry and to ask important questions with the people we are engaged with. And that can be our audience, our stakeholders, our co-producers and creative teams. And so Reality Craft grew out of a set of questions. It grew out of a a retreat I was at Esalen in 2017, 18, I believe, where I was talking to other professors about how our entire process, when you think about AR, VR, XR design, is often backward. It's often thinking about the technology before the desired goal or impact or call to action. And so I wanted to start people from a what is the world you want to create and why perspective, and then go through every aspect of that world creation process. So Reality Craft stands for a series of questions about the reality, the world that you want to create. What is the impact of it? And then we go through the aspects and the details of terrain and land and people and the assets, the art, all of the things that make a world come to life. And over the last year and a half, I began prototyping that as a book, as a course. I did a 6-week course that included AR, VR, XR design with aspects of generative and AI tooling and things like Gaussian splats and being able to do reality capture, reality scanning, and how that can come together for world building, for design, for public planning, for doing the sorts of things that we want to create in the real world, like better housing or more resilient communities. So I've been down this path now for many years, but I started building an app this summer, and that takes people through the entire Realitycraft framework and the questions while giving people tooling and precision prompt craft tools. I wrote a book on prompt craft in 2023 that solidified a bit of my journey in use of AI with AR, VR, XR tooling, and how to approach that as an individual inquiry process that changes over time, right? So because we experiment with new technologies, sometimes we find the edge and then we
Right.
realize we don't want to be at that edge anymore. I feel that way with certain AI tools. If I feel like a company is not aligned with who I want to be or the world I want to create, I want to put that tool down and pick something else up. As an artist, I want to be aligned with my tooling, my purpose, my process, right? So
Yes.
I'm currently working on a different book now about film, and that's about tooling and it's about process and it's about allowing the media itself to evolve even as it changes us. We think about film as a media. So much of that has evolved even as the immersive community has really come to life, right? 360 storytelling now for a decade, these AR, VR, XR experiences that are now in giant domes and beautiful social spaces. I'm very excited for the future of immersive storytelling because I've seen the evolution of these media and how we dance with it, how it becomes this very fluid
Oh,
evolution.
beautiful. Love it. And I can't wait for you to show us some of your great work. But yeah, before that, I think it would be helpful for you to also mention some of the tools that you prefer, because you just touched on it. So curious, what are the tools that, meet your criteria?
Well, I tend to test a number of things that are currently in early beta. That
Mhm.
includes things like local LLMs and more ethical AI tooling. So companies from around the world will send me their model that they developed open source or with a community with consent. I'm currently testing out other 3D tools called World Engine. That is from a Masterpiece X. And I appreciate what they're doing because it is like a vibe coding for 3D workflow, and something that gives it more of an intuitive process. I really enjoy that. I dabble in Blender. I can use Unity, I can use Unreal, but to be honest, I find some of those tools are not native or comfortable for me. And so I'm constantly looking for a better interface, a better workflow, more of a canvas approach. And that was part of what I was prototyping with Realitycraft as well in the app, was thinking about curation and creation as more of a fluid, almost a whiteboarding process, and something that allows me to go from whiteboard to precision prompt craft to prototype. And I do use a handful of 3D tools, but to be honest, I hire more technical artists these days than I do the work myself because for time and when you're thinking about producing something large, the kinds of things I do best are strategy, reality capture, production, and holding the whole, and helping each of the individuals figure out where they might sit as part of a collective.
Love it. You're the leader, making everything come to life. Amazing.
Sometimes I'm the glue, right? The producer is sometimes just what keeps it from falling apart.
Amazing. Awesome. Yeah, I would love for you to show us some of your great work so people can kind of, get a sense. Do you want to share your screen?
I'm going to show you something very quickly. Sure. This is just a 1 minute sample, but I wanted you to see something I've been experimenting with at home. And
Mhm.
let's see if we get that to play.
And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, please put it in the chat.
So this is a splat of Oakland where I live. This is Jack London Square. What you're seeing there is Jack London's house. And so this is a tourist spot, a historic spot. What I did was go out with the team. Someone from XGrids brought over their what is now the Portal Cam. I tested the earlier version right before that. And so the goal with this was to do large scale reality capture. And we can go ahead and drop that. But I wanted you to see basically taking splats to game at this stage. And so, and there's a handful of you who are experimenting in these models. This was in a rival space, but basically you're taking the captured splat, the reality capture of about a block. And I did a couple of these in Oakland and then link them together. So that becomes the framework for an educational game or a mystery hunt. I originally wrote this as a mystery sort of scavenger hunt experience that could be built with the other historic and tourism boards locally. I believe that we are designing, even as we design immersive spaces in virtual, we are also doing that in physical space. And when we give people access to what a place can become, both good or bad, we help them make better decisions. We give them more agency. Interactivity is a transmission of agency. And so what I want people to be able to do is to not just walk through Jack London Square today, but to walk through it 50 years from now and to see, well, what are the impacts of climate if we aren't necessarily watching our bay levels? Are we underwater at that point? Do we know what is predicted for this region? So that area is one that is predicted to potentially be underwater within the next 40 years. And so these are one of those conversations where a historic zone is going to be directly impacted. And there isn't currently a strong enough plan to address that, where a gameplay, an educational experience can potentially address the knowledge gap while helping people make better decisions about their future.
Wow, very impactful work. Yeah, I had no idea this is happening in Oakland. Interesting.
Experiments at this stage. I am reaching out to local groups. So if you're in Oakland and you want to talk about building games, this was built as the Port Mystery game originally because I wanted people exploring the physical space and then going up and talking to a statue and having the statue come to life and talk to you about the history or the future of that place.
Wow. Is the city supporting any of these? Have you reached out?
I have not reached out to the city of Oakland yet. They have gone through a tremendous transition with a new mayor, and so things are just settling out. But I have talked to some of the folks in the arts program specifically, as well as local foundations. So Steph Curry does playable work here. I very much believe in playable public spaces, but that requires public AI that is ethical and appropriate and trustable, transparency, things that don't necessarily exist yet. So we are building the policy, the infrastructure, the same time we're building the technology and the storytelling and the creative experience.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. That's really impactful. And I'm curious, how does this Realitycraft framework also de-risks the innovation for founders?
So I work with teams all over the world. In some cases, we are building a full simulation or a video or a public plan that other people can participate in. And each of those endeavors has different touch points and different concerns, whether that's use of AI in public, that could be challenges with where data lives or where data goes, privacy concerns. All of those have to be wound up into a plan before a city or a public institution can say yes. I used to work at State Department as well as in the city of LA, where I served as a local representative. And it can take months to get those kinds of approvals, you know? And so right now, what we're seeing is the timing of experimentation like with local community groups, is much faster than governments can move, and institutions are sort of behind the curve.
Mm,
And are trying to ask the same questions. So, where I focus with the Realitycraft framework and also with my strategic work is helping them ask the right questions at the right time so that the decisions they're making, whether that's for the public or for their own use, are aligned, appropriate, something that they can speak to later, whether it's to their kids or to their community, and feel good about.
mm,
Right now, some of those conversations are muddy, or perhaps they're revealing dark patterns. And I know we've explored a bit of this, where use of AI combined with certain incentives, whether that's sort of hyper capitalism or other things, that can lead to some really corrosive effects. And that's
mm.
for our communities, and that's also for our neighbors. So
Right.
I'm constantly asking those questions, in part so that my neighbors are safe the same way that I experience. So that changes how we reflect and how we use different technologies. I'm currently not a smart glasses user, even though I own some. I don't like to take them out in public. And
Mm.
there's some very specific social concerns that I think we're all sitting with right now about when is it appropriate to use these technologies, and maybe when is it time to put it away.
Yes, mindful use of technology is everything. And the event we both attended yesterday was all about that. And I really want to dig deeper on this topic of ethics. I know you and I are active in that side of AI. And more specifically, as the VP of XR Guild, you are providing concrete tools to fight these ethical battles. So I would love for you to share a little bit about what XR Guild is and what this new library is all about.
Sure. So XR Guild formed during the pandemic 3-4 years ago now as a group of professionals who work in AR, VR, XR, and the aligned immersive industries, whether that's spatial web or something in hardware. We formed so that we would be able to come to each other and develop ethical best practices and develop a sense of both camaraderie, but also mutual support. So, I was a part of in Hollywood, the Writers Guild, the Producers Guild. These sorts of organizations are really beneficial for the creators as well as the technical professionals, and we felt that need in the XR industry, but we also recognized that we weren't going to be a union. We were going to be something more focused on ethics, education, events, and helping people build the best possible experiences they can. The Guild Hall is our immersive experience, and that is what we're building currently in social VR worlds. And so the library, which we began working on a year and a half ago, I believe, is a collaborative work within XR Guild to create a large reading library, a collection of R&D resources. AI ethics is one of many categories there. So, whether you're working on biomarkers and the ethics of using medical data, or working with children, working in education, there are resources there that maybe haven't been in your view before. We've done our best to collect a few hundred of the best possible resources, and we are going to go back and continually curate that. So, in 2026, the library will be in the immersive web. Our goal is to have that ready for you in a few months, and then to be able to search those collections, which you can already do if you go to library.xrguild.org. You can go and check out the collections, and you can do your own research.
Wow, really impressive work. Is there any example of content that you've created for this library that you can share with us?
I built specifically the AI ethics collection, so my curation work with the team. So there's a number of us, Julian Reyes, Sarah Barker. We did actually just create a video, and I will post that to my LinkedIn shortly. Um,
Yes.
where we are introducing the Guild Library, and that's voiced by Sarah Barker. So there is a number of folks, say from the XR Guild is maintaining our library, and we are really working on the searchability and also the expansion of that collection, recognizing that right now our industry is, maybe tens of thousands of people, but it is growing fast as
Mhm.
these immersive web spaces grow, as the international community grows. We are going to see millions of world builders and creators all referencing similar bodies of work. So we want to make sure that's available, and certainly for the next generation. We also provide a mentorship program at XR Guild. So if you're starting out, if you're early on in your career and you're looking to be matched with other people, reach out. We'd love to hear from you.
Wow, really impactful work. Yeah, I mean, putting the work and really building a library resource for everyone to tap into, that is really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I will definitely check it out. And I'm curious on the topic of ethics, how do you think we can balance this, incredible speed of generative AI with the need for data sovereignty? Is it actually possible to even build immersive AI-driven worlds without exploiting users' data privacy?
Oh, it's a super challenging, very challenging conversation, right? Every game company right now is having this conversation about how much Gen AI do we want in our workflow? Is it only for concept or is it for production? Many companies I know are saying only for concept, not for production. Um,
Mm.
I explore many of the world models and I test them out. But I also want to test them out to find out those ethical edges, right? Because some of them have been sourced on YouTube. Some of them have been sourced on, whatever they could pick up off of a camera. There's a lot of different types of world models that are coming, and some of them have been incredibly well sourced. In the video space, looking at Moon Valley from Mary, for example, they really took the time to build more of a consent-driven approach. Most of the world models are not there yet. There are a handful of world models that are being built from the content layer up, having people go out with scanners and scan the same way Google did when they were making our maps, right? That's the work to go through to order to build something that is comprehensive, but is also sort of self-captured in the sense that the team itself was able to amass that body of work.
Mhm.
Very few companies are going to have the resources to do that's something very extensive. If you think about it, it's just a tremendous amount of data and years of work to get there. So what we're seeing right now in world models, it runs the gamut. And often you can go through and find out, if you scratch the surface or if you go to Hugging Face and other places, you can find out how their models were sourced. So I would encourage everyone here, if you're exploring world models or if you're exploring other types of generative work in general, to dig in, explore and experiment, but also find out, well, how did they source this material? And do I feel comfortable with that? Is that explainable in a way that I can go back and explain it to my team and my lawyer if I'm producing something? So I get hired to create AI, both video and 3D work from time to time. The legal implications are huge and changing quickly. They are different country to country. And so these are very moving targets. And I will say that many people, being more risk averse, are just saying, I don't necessarily know how to engage with this space. The last AI video I made was for an event in San Francisco during SF Tech Week. And it was for a room of large scale philanthropists and foundations who are trying to figure out how they want to engage with AI. So I wanted to keep them at that edge of comfort or discomfort while recognizing that we can create any flavor of future. It's not chocolate or vanilla. It's not dystopian or techno-utopian. There are infinite options ahead of us. And we're innovative, we're creative, and that's a tension, right? Innovation is a tension. It creates tension, but it's also sometimes a beneficial tension. And sometimes it's the edge we need to be able to say, I don't want to be on that edge anymore. I'm going to step back and do something different. So we learn a lot in the experimentation space. I would encourage those of you who feel comfortable exploring that and experimenting in that to be relatively transparent about those experiments, because we learn a lot from each other, but we
Mhm.
also learn where, certain models, certain companies, certain tools should probably be put back in the toolbox and not picked up again.
Very good point. Yes, responsible innovation is everything. And I love to get into this topic of, you brought up that different countries are treating these differently. And I know in one of our other episodes in the chat, you were sharing how creatives are treated very differently in different countries. I really want to hear your insights on that. But before that, we have a couple of questions from Felipe. Um, One, he said, Evo, you've been building worlds since before the internet was cool. Do you ever look at the metaverse hype today and just roll your eyes? What are we getting wrong that you solved 20 years ago?
Absolutely. There are times when I look at the metaverse hype, and it's often the economic side of that conversation that I roll my eyes at, not the technical, because the technical was all in the roadmap in 2005 when we think of the convergence of live streaming, digital twins, and AR, VR, XR. Those things were mapped out decades ago. But I do roll my eyes at how the economic layers, including various Web3 entities, have kind of um, shifted a conversation into a direction that I was less interested in personally. So that's where I felt like we lost the plot a little bit of what immersive worlds can do, um, in terms of social action, in terms of public planning, participation, and democracy. I was building programs for participation and democracy in Second Life in 2007, 8, 9, in ways that were more sophisticated than what we're seeing now in terms of the public commons. If you think about where is the actual sort of edge of protest, it's places like Roblox. So I think we are still getting it right when it comes to understanding that immersive worlds are edges that we can explore and experiment and build new social movements inside. But your second question, Felipe, and I'd like to read this specifically. What specific tools or frameworks does it offer for developers who want to ensure that they aren't accidentally building surveillance capitalism into their worlds? And this is something that I personally am trying to figure out how to crack as a nut. And this is, I think, what we need are better best practices and guides for producers, for creative teams, for agencies, for anyone who's working in the immersive space, because surveillance capitalism is baked into most of the big AI tools, especially the LLMs that we talk about on the news day to day. I don't feel comfortable with that in my stack. And as a nonprofit organization, I sometimes have to push back as a board member to say, I don't know that we should be putting this data in this company. So
Mm.
that's personal data, right? So nonprofit organizations, they have large data rolls of people. And
Right.
if they are turning over all of their development data or all of their customer client data to companies that we don't feel we can trust, we don't know what's happening with that information. And that is a very sort of black box, nebulous, risky situation, especially for people who are trying to do good in the world. So I encourage, and I meet with nonprofits and public sector organizations fairly frequently. I encourage them to think about the entire data chain. Who is at risk in their data, and are they making them more at risk? And so
Mm.
that can include not asking all the right questions. So sometimes we ask a lot of questions. Event producers also do this. We ask a lot of questions, and then we're not necessarily being hygienic about where that data goes afterward. that's a problem. That's a social problem. That's a problem that creates risk for my neighbor who happens to be, targeted by by ICE or something. We have lots of concerns to unpack where what we do in immersive spaces and what we do with our data has real world implications potentially that creates risk and harm. So, um, I don't think we have great tools right now to implement those checks technically because there is relatively little understanding of outside of the AI ethics and safety circles. There are great experts in the AI safety and ethics circles, but they're not necessarily being heard in every boardroom when it comes to making the decisions about where data goes. So I think there's a huge gap there, Felipe. We're trying to think through what needs to be published next. I think that is including a best practices guide. um,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be prescriptive personally on which tools you should avoid or engage with. But that is something that the Realitycraft app, I created a tool library, and then you can decide for yourself whether to turn it green, yellow, or red so that you are alerting yourself whether you want to use the tool. And you can do this with your team too. So Realitycraft as an app was designed for teams to be able to tell each other from a policy point of view that we use these teams, these tools, and we don't use these tools or these methods.
Wow, really powerful. And what's interesting is that a lot of these tools can change their policies too. Like, they may be good for today, but tomorrow they decide monetization using data is a better way. So
Right.
it's an interesting time. So we have to constantly validate and inform each other of these challenges. But thank you for sharing that. I got a question from Shadi. You mentioned you've been doing art and code since the 80s. For those of us who feel overwhelmed by the speed of AI today, does Realitycraft offer a way to slow down and design with intention rather than just chasing the latest update?
I'm with you, Shadi, in terms of slowing down and enjoying the textures and the details of life. Um, as I mentioned, the book I'm working on right now is about film and the evolution of photography and what is moved from an analog to a digital process. Um, I personally believe that we do our best work when we are a bit more calm and centered and emotionally regulated, not dysregulated. And so, if we are constantly creating from this manic, speedy, it can affect the work and it can affect whether the creative art, whatever we're creating, is landing for people. So, the Realitycraft process does dig into some of that. It digs into the textures, it digs into the tone, the vibe, the feeling that you wanna transmit. So much of world building tends to be very, like, "Let's terraform," and this is it because it's, a product of processes like tabletop gaming where you need very specific things to do specific functions. But cinema and filmmakers and storytellers understand that, your vibe, your energy, the little details of a world are what make it magical.
Yes.
That's what sets us apart. And even now, like, you and I set ourselves apart by doing certain things that make us unique, that makes us a character that people remember. And so I believe that, and thank you, Shadi, for that provocation, because I want to continually bring people into a more slow but also thoughtful process in their creativity, so that maybe you're taking more time thinking about the work before you go and produce it. Or maybe you're taking more experimental time in concept development, which is a vital and huge amounts of work go into concept development. Maybe you're spending more time there. And AI can be a partner in that. I use AI tremendously for concept development in some cases, but I will often sit down with a client and say, "How do you feel about this?" And are there tools you would want me to use? Are there assets you would want me to use or not use? What's off limits?
Right.
Because that off limits, that boundary, it creates the experiment that we can then go through together and try 1,500 different iterations in some cases before we land on whatever that production element is going to be. Um, I find that Realitycraft as a process gives me the precision. And I refer to this as precision prompt craft in the app because what you're doing is deciding every little detail, the same way a filmmaker would when you're creating not just a script, but a description of the entire world. So I hope that answers your question. I know we all have different intentions that we're holding, but intention is what helps teams gel. And creatives sometimes need a lot of time to sit with stuff. My co-author on this current book on film, as an analog film preservation artist, works at a different pace than I do. I have to recognize that my constant practice is to slow down and meet my collaborators where they are.
Very good point. And with every, every day we're getting so many new tools out there with Gen AI. It's just really hard to keep up. So I feel and hear you, Shadi. This is not an easy thing, and always feeling behind, and then wanting to create and differentiate. So thank you for the great response, Evo. Um, Going back to the question I kind of touched on earlier, how do you see creatives in different countries are treated or supported, in the XR industry or beyond?
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to some folks around the world, I think, who are doing a great job. I was collaborating recently with some folks in Switzerland at CERN. They are building models and tooling at a national level. And then sharing that in an open source way, which I think is very interesting for AI development as a potential path that others can follow. In the UK, they've got some tremendous work for immersive creators. Immerse UK, I believe, is the organization that a colleague of mine, Asha, works for. And she has a regular grants and funding opportunities list that comes out. I believe Inez Said also does this with Tenet XR. She's got a regular list of great opportunities, and many of those are in Europe. Not necessarily in North America. We aren't necessarily seeing the same funding mechanisms in the US. What's being funded in the US is sometimes less sort of public oriented and more government or military oriented. And so that has been, I think, frustrating for those of us who are creatives and want to build big and beautiful things. Some of those folks I know have gone to other countries to do that. They've gone to Thailand, where there's a much more open and experimental creative community now. Thailand evolved from being a more copy-paste ecosystem into being something that is far more creative in the last few decades. Japan has millions of people using metaverse and social web, social 3D web spaces. Their metaverse conferences are huge. In Korea as well. And we also see countries where smart glasses are the norm, not the exception, right? So throughout Asia, the relationship between XR and the public is very different. Also, the expectations of privacy are very different. And so some of that has evolved differently in part because the rules and regulations are different as well.
Very interesting. Which countries are more comfortable with XR glasses? I'm curious.
Throughout Asia, generally, so China, it was very common to see professionals using smart glasses as part of their job. So that can be across industries, whether you're a delivery person or in medical. Smart glasses for remote work have become far more common all over the world. But you certainly see a number of use cases coming out of Germany, where sort of the industrial metaverse, the XR for work, has really been a boon. Same with Scandinavia, Netherlands. This is where you see a lot of these types of companies really shining. In part, there is more government support. So one of my colleagues at XR Guild is working out of Finland. We are seeing a number of folks migrating outside of the US and moving all over the world in order to do public-private partnerships or to build new types of companies.
Well, that is very sad to see that happening. But yeah, interesting that other countries are a lot more open. And I mean, when we go to AWE or CES, we see a lot of, talents and innovations from Korea, Japan, and yeah, China, of course. So really interesting. I had no idea that they have adopted it so well. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Evo. I want to touch on your great project in the physical world, Grow a Home. Uh, yeah, I'm curious, how are you using AI and XR for that? Maybe share a little bit more about it.
Sure. So I began sort of a lifelong passion in building as a kid. My dad was a builder, and so I grew up with blueprints and drawing houses. And one of the things I like to do most is design houses for fun. But about 25 years ago, I was visiting a monastery, and they were building with papercrete. And I became interested in recycled materials for building new structures. I then started researching hempcrete and hemp lime construction. And today, as of the last year or two, you can use hemp lime construction methods all over the world. It's built into the residential building code. There are a lot of different materials that can basically be grown. And so, even here in the US with the Lower Sioux tribe, they are growing 130 homes, which I
Oh,
think is phenomenal. They've built a vertical manufacturing zone basically within the reservation to grow homes from hemp. To me, that is an absolutely fascinating way when you're thinking about resiliency. Hempcrete is one of the few materials that's fireproof, bug-proof, and there are a handful of these materials. Redwood as well.
yes.
Redwood is fireproof, bug-proof, but we don't necessarily get this information to your average person who's trying to do a renovation or figure out how to rebuild after a disaster. So that's the knowledge gap. Again, we're addressing knowledge gaps through spatial immersive computing. And then AI becomes a tool, for example, to be able to spec a project. And I've been using and testing AR methods specifically. AR is currently used in home renovation and in being able to do some planning if you're trying to design or build something new. But those tools aren't well put together. And so Grow a Home has been one part immersive documentary and one part immersive tooling so that we can begin to both address the knowledge gap about these materials and how they're being used, and also learn how to build this way and in other unique ways for our own lives. We're seeing a huge uptick in use of especially hemp lime materials, but other what we call biogenic building materials. And so Grow a Home is a document. I'm working on where that is going to live, because it may just be the best thing to just release it all on YouTube and let you go to it in your VR headsets. I filmed about 2 hours of footage so far, including at a folk museum in Norway, where it is a museum of houses going back to the 11th, 12th century. And so studying what makes a house last. How do how do you design for resiliency, but also use of what you have in front of you, natural building materials, and what is easy to resource from your own region. We know that housing is unaffordable in most places, especially in North America. So how we address this is life or death, especially for those who've been impacted by disasters, whether you're in LA and you've been lost your home due to fire, or you're trying to deal with a post-hurricane cleanup in areas such as North Carolina. That the lack of housing is keeping people homeless, and homelessness being criminalized means that we have a huge social problem that is just welling up under our feet, right? It's our colleagues, it's our friends, it's our community that's at stake. And I believe we have to use our tools to figure out, how can we do this better? How do we build faster, more effective, resilient homes that people can actually afford to live in?
Well, such a good point. I should introduce you to someone who I met at a hardware meetup, and he's working on, building housing for, disaster relief. So this is a really interesting topic and very impactful work again. Wow, I'm really impressed. Awesome. As we're approaching towards the end of the show, I would love to hear your thoughts in terms of the predictions you have for the next 12 to 18 months. You have been involved from very early days of this space. I'm curious, what do you think is the number one prediction for the interactions of generative AI and immersive environments, or intersection of generative AI and immersive environments?
I suspect we're going to see more and more of the uh, teams using local approaches that they've built themselves, that they trust, that they've connected through their own, whether that's open source communities or otherwise. And that's not to completely reject the entire sort of industrial AI complex that's out there, but to say we're going to selectively engage some of these tools. So I see, for example, some teams still using Claude Code, but not necessarily using other LLMs in favor of a local LLM that they're using on their own system. So these kinds of being able to control the workflow, control the model, control the assets, and being able to create from that space gives people a sense that they are not necessarily contributing to, whether it's an ethical ecosystem or contributing to something that feels not aligned with the future they want. World models are on the rise, and people are very excited about the potential of world models, but they're taking lots of different forms. And so I'm excited about interactive world models, because I think there's a lot to be explored there, basically taking a handful of images and being able to extrapolate entire worlds. Is that adding to slop? That is a very important question that teams need to ask before they go too far down the rabbit hole of world models, and maybe figure out that they want to create certain types of things, but not others. So again, going back to your own teams, your own creative process, your own inquiry as a part of your workflow, not as a step you make at the beginning, but as an iterative process. Keep asking questions. Keep going back to your teammates and saying, "Does this feel right? Or am I off base here? Is this going to land with our audience? Or maybe is this too far from where our audience wants to be?" And so these are the questions. And I see more and more, especially in gaming, teams that are rejecting generative AI altogether in favor of maintaining trust with their audience. And trust with the audience, I think, is going to be the number one sort of strategic, I don't want to call trust a buzzword, but you understand that people are going to be having a different conversation about trust in 2026. What we've been talking about in back rooms and in little, roundtables and privacy sessions is going to become first and foremost what people are talking about before they produce.
Yes, I totally agree. Trust and privacy are becoming a moat, because technology is no longer the moat. So we kind of have to figure out other ways to get closer to our audience and show them that we care about them and not just about the money. Very good point. And do you have any thoughts on the hardware side, where we're heading with that? Any predictions?
Uh, um, I will say I think trust is also the factor here as well in terms of what people are willing to accept in different places around the world. Whether they feel like they can trust you if you're wearing smart glasses will determine how the public reacts to that. Um, it's going to be different flavors of future all around. And often we forget that sometimes we wear hardware to try and connect us more to people, but the hardware removes us more from people instead. And so
Yes.
I think many of us are starting to have that sense that maybe it's not about the hardware, it's about the connection that we're seeking. And if a technology supports your connectedness, then keep it. And if technology is keeping you from connecting with people, maybe leave it at home.
Love it. Very good advice. And for those ready to stop just prompting and start building, what is the very first step they should take with Realitycraft today?
You're welcome to come and visit me on the web. I do have the app up in beta. However, I have turned off some of the features as we are testing currently. But you can visit me at evo.ist, say hi, drop me a line. And there's a number of different videos and publishing and projects there. The next event we're doing is a portal crawl across multiple social VR art worlds. And so that's a fun collaborative process I do with a crew called Meta Traversal. And we're doing the next one on the 30th of December. So I'll post that on LinkedIn so you can RSVP. If you've made it to the end of this, we'd love to see you there. These portal crawls we've been doing now for 3 years. We started doing them as a way to walk across the worlds. This time we're going to more look at the art of portals. And so it's more of a look at different worlds and how creators are using these mechanisms in fun and interesting and creative ways. So I hope you'll join us on December 30th for that. That's the latest Meta Traversal event. And otherwise, I hope you'll reach out. Come and find me. Take me on a tour of your world. I would love to see what you're creating and working on. And reach out if there's some interesting way we can collaborate.
Love it. Any other project? I mean, you mentioned the book briefly. Any dates that that new book is coming out?
Oh goodness. So the film book is coming out in February, and Carlos reminded me that we also have a series that will be coming out in its second season from the Virtual Worlds Museum. So some of you have been following the work we've been doing at VWM. I co-host with Julian Reyes an interview series where we go inside worlds and interview folks. Carlos Austin here is our cinematographer, or machinimatographer, I should say. And so the Spotlight series is open for any of you who want to explore some of these worlds in our world building journeys, but also to just get a sense of what we're creating with different world builders. I'm working on a longer form interview series called the Realitycraft that will be out in the first quarter of 2026 as well.
And where is that published?
That's going to be on YouTube. A lot of what I'm doing, I just try and get out there to YouTube. I do have some projects coming for television as well, as including a generative piece, but I don't know the dates on that currently. So watch YouTube. You can subscribe at Evo Realitycraft.
Love it. And if you can share these links in the chat afterwards would be great. Thank you so much, Evo. This was so insightful and really impressive work and impactful. I mean, it's really hard to do all of this, but doing it so mindfully, that is even more powerful. Thank you. Kudos to you for all this great work. Can't wait to see the new book and the new projects and documentary and everything else that you have lined up for us. And thanks to our amazing engaged audience that have been with us, Carlos, Felipe, Shadi, Jean, and Dr. Ole, Christina, Chris, and everyone else who tuned in. We're so grateful for you. Please join back next week. Is our last episode of this season of the Emergence Show. Next year, we're going to have a little bit different theme. And thank you again, everyone. Have a beautiful rest of your day. and see you next week. Bye.
Thank you.